Hi, I'm Bob Gimlin. Les Stroud is a documentarian, musician, and first and foremost, a survivalist. And in the world of celebrity survivalists, he stands alone. Get it? Because he's the only one that goes out alone. But he really is perfect for the study of the Sasquatch phenomena, not only because he's comfortable being out in desolate places alone, but because he's skilled at documenting at the same time. A lot of people can do one or the other, but doing both is the key. In 2006, Les had an experience in Alaska while filming Survivorman. It was season 2, and on his third day there, he was making a bed of grass, or rather harvesting grass for a bed, when he quite literally heard a large ape in a tree hooting or whooping. What he's since learned is called a pant hoot, like this. Like that. And it happened 4 more times, and he said it sounded no more than 50 yards away, which, when it's just you, is quite close. No, he wasn't filming at that moment. Back then, he hadn't been equipped to keep everything running all the time. And not only that, he had to get his bed ready. You can't just film all the time, because obviously spending the night in Alaska was no joke. So he heard the noise just moments before filming this. He's heard all the usual culprits before, and this was none of those. Now, as this vocalization is happening, he's frozen, just listening, and staring at his camera, hoping he can get to it in time to get some audio. Finally, after almost a minute of listening to this vocalization, he lunged for his camera, and as soon as he did, whatever was in the tree came out of the tree. He heard it land, and then it stomped away. Stomped, as if taking particular care to not be stealthy. It wanted those around to understand that it was there, and that it was big. And after this incredible experience, all he could really do was get back to the work of Survivormanning. And if I pause right here, you can actually see where he's nervously looking at the direction of where he heard the vocalization. Les said that he was unnerved for the rest of his stay in Alaska, which was unusual for him. Even in this scene, you can tell he's a little uncomfortable. I actually had the opportunity to speak with Les about his Bigfoot encounter and his new Bigfoot documentary, and I'll be uploading that interview in a couple of days. But ever since the season of Survivorman Bigfoot came out, I wondered why Les didn't mention this encounter in the Alaska episode itself. You know, what makes for better TV than an unexpected intrusion from the unknown? My guess was that he didn't mention it in the episode because he was afraid that it would be seen as a shameless publicity stunt. He said no, he just wanted to stick to the premise of the show, which was surviving. How would it look if the, quote, Survivorman was already spooked in season 2? Whatever it was that he heard, it has since spurred Les to explore the allegedly inexplicable sightings of large, upright bipeds in North America and other parts of the world. What he described in Alaska could have probably been a chimp, but the fact of the matter is, Alaska has a lot more Sasquatch sightings than chimp sightings. This experience in 2006, and others since, led him to dedicate a season of Survivorman to the subject. And perhaps my favorite thing to come out of this season was from Radium Springs. Again, I'll upload the full interview as soon as possible in the next couple days, but I thought the capture at Radium Springs was particularly noteworthy, but Les seemed sheepish about it. He placed an apple in a tree with a camera aimed at it. The video capture camera's response rate was less than 1/10 of a second, and sensitive enough to capture this branch's gentle sway, or this little mouse, even dust. His crew was at the base of the mountain, and they had eyes on his host to this remote location in the Canadian Rockies. In short, Les was alone. He's certain of that. In the morning, the apple was gone, nowhere to be found, with no crumbs on the forest floor, and the camera did not activate fast enough to record the perpetrator, which is curious in itself, simply because this camera was designed specifically to avoid this exact happenstance. And the camera picked nothing up, which shouldn't really be possible, because had it either fallen or was taken, it should have been recorded. That's all he thought he captured, an apple disappearing. The mystery of the disappearing apple, not too exciting, but later it was brought to his attention that there was more to it. So you're looking at a clip from earlier in the night, when the camera was activated by nothing that we can see, but then the next time the camera's triggered, the apple's gone. And not only does the apple disappear, but also a branch wobbles. Here it is a couple more times. See that? And here's a closer look. Here it is again. And now slowed down. And then also a creature appears in frame, very briefly. very briefly in the bottom left. Here's the branch wobble, and then here's the creature. And no, that's not the apple falling, because you can clearly see it coming up. It comes up and then back down. It's not already there when the video capture starts, and then goes down. It comes up and then down. You know, it actually does kind of look like the apple, but what would toss an apple? Curious. To be clear, an apple and several candy bars in this tree disappeared in the less than a second it took for the camera to activate, which to me at least is pretty wild. And also kinda rules out the possibility that Les was being messed with by a person, because I don't even know how a person would go about doing that. So there's a lot more going on in this clip than it seemed. So you could say that a pika, or some rodent, was behind the apple, eating away at it, unobserved by the camera. Then the structural integrity failed all at once, and the apple fell, and the rodent leapt after it, and the camera, for whatever reason, was slow to snap a picture. Well, that doesn't explain why the ground shakes. See that? Oh, and this fuzzball was some 7 feet off the ground. So you could say bear or elk, but how could either of those animals be 6 feet off the ground without their ears being visible? If that's a bear's butt, then we have a whole other problem. So the apple's gone, the ground shakes, fuzzy thing 7 feet off the ground, and whatever happened so fast that the instant camera couldn't capture it. You could say if the camera's activation was instant, then it couldn't have been a Sasquatch that tripped it. Well, that's true. Unless there is some skill or feature that goes beyond that which we truly understand, which seems quite likely to me. You know, I'm gonna scrub through this. The movement at the bottom of the screen really does look like the apple. See, here it is in the tree, and then look at the bottom of the screen. Doesn't that look like the apple? But what would toss an apple like that? And why? 6 or 7 feet off the ground. The second most intriguing thing that Les collected in his Bigfoot series, to me, was the pinniped skeleton, probably a sea lion. So Les is heading toward his location when he comes across this. This was in British Columbia, Canada. Not only because of how complete and articulated the skeleton is, which is unusual or rare, but by no means impossible, but I like how it pointed directly up at what seems to be a bear nest. I think too often a lot of researchers falsely assume that these creatures, if they exist at all, are trying to communicate with them. But again, if these creatures are real, they are likely communicating with each other a lot more than they're communicating with us. And what, in nature, is more noticeable than a big, white, perfectly preserved and assembled skeleton? Puzzle of a spinal column. Hey, there's something to be cautious of right here. Perhaps my favorite witness to Bigfoot that I've ever personally spoken with was a gentleman from Georgia, and he had several experiences in the 70s, and his first indication that something was about was a set of 3 water moccasins, looped around a branch in simple overhand knots. One was still alive. The snakes didn't block the waterway that he was boating down, but in hindsight, he thought that they blocked a causeway bisecting the waterway. Too narrow for boats, but just about right for anything walking or wading between the channels, which most people probably wouldn't have the stomach for. It wasn't until I saw Les's find here, the skeleton, that I began to wonder what these snakes would look like once all the flesh was gone. I've found more deer remains than I can count, and they've always been picked apart. I've found pieces of the spine, but not like this. My neck of the woods really only has coyote and bobcats. We have occasional black bears that wander into town, and a single and elusive mountain lion that gets caught on game cameras, but no wolves or brown bears. Regardless, this just isn't something you see every day, much less placed the way it seems to be. And Les assured me that it's unlikely that any human had been there for years, maybe more. I'm not a fan of blob squatch. In fact, that's why I couldn't stomach Scott Carpenter's work for the longest time. May he rest in peace, until I took a closer look at it anyway. Regardless, this footage isn't from Les's Bigfoot season. This comes from season 7, when Les was in Romania, in the Transylvanian Alps. I'm ready to die on this hill. This isn't a leaf, it's not an artifact of compression. This is something. Something in Europe. And Les confirmed that oftentimes viewers want to know what something is, and every single time, when Les and his team went back to the raw footage, they could clearly make out a shadow or stick or something. But not this time. Les said that they cannot account for what this is, and that it seems to be exactly what it looks like, something shaped like that, after he nearly fell off a cliff, or something of that nature. This is something that is remarkably shaped like a Sasquatch. Well, What's shaped like a Sasquatch? I can think of at least one thing, and it might be a Sasquatch-shaped mound, but either way, there's something shaped like a Sasquatch there. As I said, I'm ready to die on this hill. This is not a blowing leaf or something. Les's upcoming Bigfoot documentary, The Question of Bigfoot, will explore this tidbit and much more. But here's the thing. Les is fundraising for his Bigfoot documentary because he doesn't want to be betrothed to a network. Yeah, I didn't realize that either. If Discovery or Paramount or whatever was footing the bill, then they get the final say on the film's content, and Les is sick of it. And to me, that's why this project is so exciting. This documentary will be unencumbered by corporatism, and freewheeling in the pursuit of answers to questions that have already been raised. Questions that are long overdue for a formidable and dynamic investigation, perhaps by someone who isn't afraid to be alone in the dark. So I strongly encourage you to check out his Kickstarter. I'll pin a link in the comments in the description. Unless you're watching this after January 4th, 2025, then disregard. There are tiers of support, ranging from a signed DVD to an expedition with Les. And by the way, the apple, the bones, those were only a couple of highlights from Survivorman Bigfoot. There's a lot more in there, not to mention all the stuff collected by the people who Les met with. And they're all on YouTube for free. I will get my interview with Les up as soon as possible, and I have not been this excited for a Bigfoot thing in a very long time. And anyway, thanks an awful lot for surviving.